Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting on the 15th of November 2022. My name's Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators this afternoon. I'd also like to welcome and introduce my colleague panel members, starting with Mr Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And noting Mr Miguel Belmar is with us virtually this afternoon. Welcome, Mr Belmar.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Thank you. We're also assisted today by a number of council staff, and I'd like to start with introducing Mr Glenn Patterson, our Chief Executive Officer, Ms Jen Bednar, Director Customer and Business Transformation, Mr James Collins, Director City Planning and Infrastructure, Ms Colette McMahon, Director Community Life, Mr Steve Coldham, Director Community Services, and we are assisted this afternoon by Jordan in AV and Nicole in Governance Support. I'd also like to welcome our gallery this afternoon and any other staff that are here with us supporting the meeting. So welcome and good afternoon. I'll open the meeting with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. Item 1.2, the diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Now move to item 2, confirmation of minutes. There is the minutes of the council meeting held on the 18th of October 2022 and I seek a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of the meeting.
I'm happy to move those minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'm happy to second those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. All in favour? Carried. Item 3, declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and have no conflicts relevant to the agenda papers to declare today. Do any council officers or my fellow administrators have any conflicts to declare?
No conflicts to declare, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman.
I have a declaration I'll be making in the closed meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. We'll note that later on. Item 4 is public question time, and we have 4 public questions submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's Council meeting. The first is from Ash Perks, and it's with regard to the subject of road resurfacing. And the question is, can someone please assess the condition of South Gippsland Highway in Cranbourne North, especially the stretch of road between Wentworth Street and Stirling Avenue? Recent roadworks and heavy rains have left the road in extremely poor condition, in brackets potholes, and heavy vehicles like trucks are extremely loud at night over the damaged road. The turn-off to Stirling has a recurring pothole that has been fixed and returned several times. A different solution is needed. I can advise through our manager city presentation, and thank you for the question, that South Gippsland Highway is a major arterial road under the control and management of the Department of Transport, not under Council's control. That also includes the intersections you've mentioned. So Council is not responsible for the condition and maintenance of this road. However, Council officers are aware of the concerns about South Gippsland Highway and will pass on the specific concerns you have raised to the Department of Transport to ensure the road condition can be assessed and repairs conducted. And we also do want to note that the recent weather events, there are many Council and Department of Transport roads which have deteriorated in condition. Council roads are inspected and maintained in line with Council's road management plan as adopted, and that's available on the City of Casey website. Question 2 is from Kusuni Mendes, and the subject is gambling advertisements on council land. And the question is, noting that Ladbrokes have sponsored the Cranbourne Cup, what is council's position on online gambling advertisements or any gambling related advertisements on council land? Is council concerned about the growing harm from online gambling? And if so, what is council doing to advocate for better protection for residents? Our Manager of Connected Communities has advised the following. The Cranbourne Cup is held at Cranbourne Racecourse, which is Crown land, not council-owned land. However, as per Council's Health and Wellbeing Strategy 2021 to 25, which again is available on Council's website, Council is developing a whole-of-council approach to gambling harm. This initiative acknowledges the changing landscape of gambling and the growing presence of online platforms, particularly those related to sports betting. Council takes seriously the social harm brought about by problem gambling for many within our community and the role that advertising plays, which cannot be underestimated. Whilst noting the present Cranbourne Racecourse example is on Crown land, in developing Council's future approach, all activities that occur on Council land are being explored and reviewed through public health and prevention lenses which are guiding this work. So thank you for your question. Question 3 is from Alicia Spencer, and it's the subject matter is Centre Road, Narre Warren flooding. And the question is, what is Council doing to mitigate the risk of future flooding of Centre Road in Narre Warren? Is Council considering lifting or redesigning the road to ensure access to the Casey Green estate during unprecedented flooding, as this is the only road in and out of the estate? And the Manager of City and Asset Planning has advised the City of Casey is aware of the Centre Road flooding and is actively working on identifying a practical solution to reduce the potential for floodwater to affect road access. The Casey Greens development is located within a catchment that discharges into the Hallam Valley contour drain, and Melbourne Water is the responsible authority for that drain. Council plans to investigate the Centre Road design and identify any opportunities to ameliorate the flooding issues. Whilst investigations continue, residents are urged to consider their own flood emergency plans should road access be further impeded during any future large rainfall events in coming weeks and months. The Victorian State Emergency Service website provides information on preparing such a plan, and you can search that through the www.ses.vic.gov.au and search Create an Emergency Plan. Council will be holding a community session with Casey Greens residents in upcoming weeks to hear directly from the community and provide an update on Melbourne Water and Council works that may help reduce the flood impact on Centre Road. So once again, thank you, Alicia Spencer, for your question. Question 4 is from Chatyana Garjavelli, and the subject matter is negotiations with both parties, and I think that's referring to political parties, to get funding promises for our council. I did not hear anything major happening to us. Why so? And the question is, being election time, lots of councils have been getting funding promises from both parties, or local councils have been asking for funding promises from both parties, and they've been getting funding promises from both sides. What are Casey getting? And I thank the Manager Communications and Marketing for the update as follows. I can assure you that in the lead up to the state election, the City of Casey has been strongly advocating for a range of projects, road and rail infrastructure that create local job opportunities and provide vital services to our community through our Connecting Casey advocacy campaign. And once again, there is quite extensive information on Council's website about the Connecting Casey advocacy campaign. The Connecting Casey advocacy campaign and priority projects have been promoted across a number of channels, including local newspapers and other media, and as I said, on our website, the Connecting Casey Facebook page and the Casey Catch-Up e-newsletter, which residents can subscribe to. There have been a number of commitments made by both major political parties during the election campaign, including a commitment to extend the Metro rail line from Cranbourne to Clyde, which Council has been advocating for, a further commitment to upgrade Berwick-Cranbourne Road, including duplication from Berwick to Sladen Street, Cranbourne, and upgrades to a number of intersections, including commitments to install traffic lights at the intersection of Berwick-Cranbourne Road and Thompsons Road. And Council's been has been advocating for upgrades along the entire Clyde Road corridor for many years. There have also been a number of commitments that are relevant for the City of Casey, including upgrades to schools, community and recreation facilities and roads. And so the City of Casey looks forward to working in partnership with the newly elected Victorian Government, which we will know about late November, early December, to deliver on projects that will boost local jobs, stimulate our economy and support our community during the next term of government. So I thank all of those residents who have submitted questions this afternoon. And I now move on to item 5, officer reports, and to item 5.1, the quarterly community report, July to September 2022. And do I have a mover for that report?
I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, I invite you to speak to item 5.1.
Thank you, Chair. If I could prefix my remarks by following on from a number of the themes which very genuinely have been raised this evening in public questions, and also a number of the themes which are reoccurring in Casey Conversations and through other public forums, including media forums around council activities, council maintenance of parks and recreations and other facilities. And I do acknowledge and thank members of the community for raising these issues and bringing to our attention where such matters can be addressed. It is not something that is unique to Casey that we find ourselves in interesting climatic conditions which have prevented perhaps to some extent the usual rollout of maintenance programs because of accessibility equipment and other external issues such availability of labour and supply chain aspects in a direct equipment sense. But I do so and acknowledge that whilst it's important for the community to raise these issues and bring to our attention such matters, it is also important for us to be reporting back to the community on our performance, not just through our statutory obligations as per the quarterly report from July to September, which I'm going to reference and speak about in a moment, but also through a number of the other publicly facing reports that we do release periodically and consistently, which demonstrate not just our priorities over forthcoming quarters and financial years and further ahead into the future, but also highlights where we are taking on board quite earnestly the response to feedback and the consultative elements from the community to ensure we are delivering a program of works which meets those expectations. So whilst we do thank and encourage and continue to reference and to action as best as we possibly can the feedback we get from the community, we also equally encourage the community to review our performance and to use that as a reference point for further consultation. But within this particular report, which is for the first quarter of this financial year, there are 34 actions which we are planning for completion. This is against our annual action plan, which we have tabled, I think, at our June council meeting. There are 3 actions also carried over from the previous reporting period, which include aspects around the council plan performance, community engagement activities, administrator engagement with the community, our capital works performance, financial performance, declaration of any contracts awarded over $5 million, and importantly, our community satisfaction survey. I'm going to talk to a number of those points shortly, but I do want to also highlight that one of the significant declarations that we make in the community report is activities that we have taken on board to advocate to both the Commonwealth and the state government on some of the matters which the community have raised in public questions, Chair, and also where that advocacy directly has reflected and resulted in a council action. And I think that's a very important part of our community engagement and our broader advocacy program. And just reflecting upon my introductory remarks, it does show that genuinely we want to engage with the community and provide that feedback and those reference points as best as we possibly can. But against the council plan performance, we do note that there has been the trial of the smart bus shelter in Doveton. There's been a number of environmental community events. We kicked off and in fact in this quarter completed the Community Leadership Program, which is a program that we are very proud of because it is not just providing interaction and direct engagement with existing community leaders from a diversity of background and all of which are very impressive individuals, but it also gives us a vital feedback to some sections of the community that we might not normally had, in addition to developing skills that may be used in a broader council sense in the future. Insofar as our capital works performance, it is important the community notes that there are 244 approved and continuing projects, culminating in an investment of $125.4 million. We forecast that the total capital works budget for this financial year will rise to $227.1 million. And one aspect which is very important and something which has been gaining some public notoriety in recent times on page 22 is the City of Casey 2022 Playground Renewal Program. It's assuring that there are 14 playgrounds within the municipality that is currently under the Playground Renewal Program, and one unique feature of this particular aspect is a lot of that renewal has been directly influenced by members of the community and particularly children and young people. And later on in the council meeting we will be talking about the child safety policy, but to have children and young people directly involved in contributing to council decision making is something we should be proud of and we should be talking about more so. Ultimately it is their assets and their facilities that they'll be using, and it's terrific to see that they are involved in that level of decision making. Chair, I just briefly wanted to touch on, as I said, the financial performance and also the community satisfaction survey. And whilst community members will note that there is an unfavourable variance of just over $20.5 million, 9%, against our budget budget forecast for this quarter. That is something that will be corrected by year's end because of timing factors when 2 significant expenditure items were due related to developed contributions. One was a decision of the Australian Government to bring forward 75% of the estimated financial assistance grants allocations, and another was also in regards to developed contributions I've referenced. Whilst there is a threshold requirement for us to be declaring those variations over $1 million, we have done so transparently. We've also put in the explanation around that, and as I said, that will be corrected by year end. There are 2 significant contracts over $5 million. One was, as I've mentioned, through a tender for suppliers of parks and playground equipment consistent with our playground upgrade program. The other was in relation to a contract of $14.5 million for Technology One, consistent with our transformation project, which we very proudly adopted at our May council meeting, and one which we will see significant productivity and efficiency improvement within the organisation, and the ambition overall is to make the organisation a technology exemplar insofar as having intuitive, adaptive technology which improves overall council services. So significant investments, but one that are very much future geared on improving the overall efficiency and operations of the organisation as a whole. Finally, Chair, if I could reference the community satisfaction survey and note that there have been decreases across most of the performance and satisfaction indicators. Our view is that this is very much consistent with the public themes we are receiving around maintenance, around issues responding to climatic matters such as flooding and roads and general maintenance and addressing council services and so forth. This is not unexpected considering some of the factors that are beyond our control, but it is an indication of where we are directly taking on board the feedback that we are very earnestly and genuinely receiving from the community and factoring that into our decision making so that we can ensure that those areas are addressed, that the communities where they believe there is vulnerabilities and where there are matters that do need specific attention are receiving that, and that we are taking on board that feedback for our longer term planning as well. So whilst we acknowledge that that is not the result that ultimately we would have liked to have received, there are a number of reasons for that, ones which will be addressed over time, but we certainly encourage the community to keep giving us that very honest, open and genuine feedback as best as possible. With those remarks, Chair, we obviously encourage members of the community to read the report. It is our transparent and clear way of providing an update against the actions which we believe are important in making the City of Casey much more livable and prosperous, consistent with all of our strategic overlays, and one which I thank the council officers involved preparing as always. And with those comments, I'm very pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few comments, and I thank Mr Boardman for his remarks covering the entirety of the report. I just wanted to focus on a couple of issues. One was that this was the time during which we undertook our leadership program, which was a terrific program which reflects the diversity in all varieties that exist within the City of Casey, and I thank all those participants, and I note also the alumni are continuing to be involved in that project. And secondly, I just wanted to focus very briefly on the report and its discussion of Strategy 3.3 of our strategies, which is supporting a climate-ready city through climate change mitigation and adaptation. And I note that a number of programs occurred during the 3-month program period, including sessions, kindergartens, a Garden for Wildlife session, Follow Your Waste tour, a culturally and linguistically diverse session, and also the involvement of council at the Doveton Show. And I think even just that single strategy reflects the diversity of programs and the diversity of skills that we have in the City of Casey and in our staff, and the services that they're able to offer the community. And with those comments, and as always, encouraging the community to read this report. It's a easy to read report. It's very well written, very easy to follow. I commend the report, and I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.2 is Amendment C288 for 75S Tuckers Road, Fernley. This is a planning scheme amendment process that has gone through the process with no submissions received. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, I invite you to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Chair. I note the two recommendations that I'm moving tonight with respect to Section 29(1) of the Planning and Environment Act and adopting the amendment in accordance with Attachment 1. And secondly, under Section 31(1) of the Planning and Environment Act, submitting the adopted amendment to the Minister for Planning for approval. I've read the documents. I note some minor changes that were proposed as a consequence of a review of the documents with respect to curtilage that will cover the heritage area. And I note that it's through this process that we've undertaken that this kind of work occurs where heritage can be refined as to what we intend to protect. And I'm grateful for the work that's occurred to ensure this outcome. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion and note that sometimes in a community such as Casey, we consider it's a new and expanding community, but as always, there is heritage fabric in our community, and it's important that it be protected. I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, I endorse Mr Belmar's comments in relation to the Fernley homestead. We note your comments that we did not receive any submissions in response to the exhibition phase and that there was an exemption provided by the Minister that did not require widespread advertising or placement of notices, but nonetheless I'm confident and quite satisfied that the process adopted is appropriate under our legislative obligations and involved consultation with potential affected parties. And for the reasons Mr Belmar has articulated, I am pleased to second the recommendation as put.
Put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3 is land acquisition, 125 Hardies Road, Clyde North. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move this, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Similarly, Chair, this is a procedural resolution which is a variance because the site in question at 125 Hardies Road has required an increase in the land footprint to be consistent with the developer considerations of the overall site. There are three parts to the recommendations, which I'll touch on in a moment, but to reflect on the background to this particular matter is we did adopt a report at our May 2020 council meeting in regards to 125 Hardies Road, Clyde North. The two subject lands were subject to constructions as referenced in the reports. That's on the Tuckers and Hardy Roads intersection, and the resolution to proceed with the acquisition of the subject land was consistent with the information provided at that time and consistent with the valuation set in the 2020 DCP process. What has occurred since then is that the council land area now needs to increase from 2,715 square metres to 4,282 square metres. This is to allow for an additional intersection along the southern frontage of the site. The intersection will provide for a future southern connection to the Hardies Road major town centre, and this has also resulted in an increase in compensation payable to the owner, which is now consistent with the 2022 developed contribution land values rather than the initial recommendation put forward in May, and I understand that the landowner has accepted the terms in a general sense. It does require extensive works to be delivered by the developers along the Hardies Road and Clyde Road and Tuckers Road intersections. It is expected that these works will be due to completed within the next 3 months, and it does represent the combination of 2 years of the partnership between the council and the MOU we have in place with the developers being the Brown Property Group. There has been a degree of adequate community engagement, and I understand that council has made a conditional offer to acquire the land consistent with what I have just described. As I said, is that throughout the course of developments, when such matters do arise, there is a statutory process to follow, including looking at appropriate valuations and to engage with the developers to ensure that there is a fair and equitable process. I'm satisfied that that has occurred, and the recommendation of 3 parts as put adequately deals with the matter. And with those comments and with the information and documentation provided to us, I'm pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, anything to add?
No, Chair, for the same reasons that Mr Boardman has carefully and clearly articulated. I have considered the documents and the reason for this motion being before Council tonight, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4, the endorsement of child safe policy. Is there a mover, please?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. Tonight, Council is adopting its child safe standards. This is back before Council as the continuing compliance with our statutory obligations. I note that what were previously 7 standards have now increased to 11 standards. It is a fundamental part of the services offered by Council that we offer services to children, and since the adoption of child safe standards in 2016, Council has been diligent in ensuring not only compliance but in setting aspirations for our child safe standards. I note that the standards now include not only that we establish culturally safe environments, but also that we uphold equity and recognise diversity, and that needs to be respected both in policy and in practice, that we have processes for complaints and concerns which are child focused, and that staff and volunteers are equipped with knowledge, skills, awareness to keep children and young people safe through ongoing education and training, as well as physical and online environments promoting safety and well-being while minimising the opportunity for children and young people to be harmed. This is a particular area of focus and interest for me in ensuring child safe standards. In my other occupation, I undertake work of a historical nature. And I note that the changes that occurred in 2016 are overdue, and it is really pleasing to see that we are continuing to work on these standards to ensure that they're kept up to date and to ensure that the children who participate in council activities are always safe, that our staff are aware of responsibilities, and that at all times we are aware of the duty of care we have to children to ensure that they are always safe whenever participating in council activities. I'm not going to speak to one of the particular documents which I understand Mr. Boardman will be addressing, which is a table, but I do want to address one issue which of which I am advised, and that is that Council has undertaken consultation, and as a request, as a result of the consultation and as a result of those surveys, there is further work that needs to be done. Those results include that 70% of children and young people who are respondents know what to do if something makes them feel unsafe and would speak to their parents or friends if they felt unsafe. 50% of children and young people respondents stated that they don't feel they have a say in things that they care about, and it's important that through our work we are able to ameliorate and improve that figure. And finally, that 37% of children and young people respondents stated that they do not know how to have a say. And there's obviously work that needs to be done, and by adopting this policy, by ensuring that staff are aware of responsibilities and of educational opportunities, that the next time we have a survey, that those figures will have hopefully not only improved a little, but substantially improved. With those comments, and noting the responsibility that all council staff have in ensuring child safety. I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And I note the figures that you've quoted are preliminary themes from the consultation process. And I note for those that are listening that that Child Safe survey has been extended until the 16th of November, which is tomorrow. So if people would like to participate, there's still time. I now invite Mr Boardman to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair, and acknowledge Mr Belmar's explanation of the policy itself, which is a significantly important document for all operations within the organisation, not just from a risk management perspective, but also from a significant conduct perspective. And I noted in relation to agenda item 5.1 that we had an example, just one example of where children and young people, that is by definition anyone 17 years of age or under, involved in decision making of council investments that were related to playgrounds. But I also note, Chair, that I think it was only 2 weeks ago that the three of us met with the Casey Youth Committee, of which there was a number of school-age children who were members of that committee. Very impressive individuals nonetheless, but by doing so we have to ensure two things. One is that it is a safe environment outside of the family parental environment that we are providing for them, but we are doing so that we are ensuring that they have a voice, they have access to speak on matters that are important to them, and we are doing that in a consultative and respectful environment. And a number of the principles and issues that are outlined in the policy provide the standards and expectations from us in a practical environment that we've recently experienced, but also for all council officers when dealing with anything from a council perspective that involves children and young people, to ensure they are aware of their obligations and they approach similar situations consistent with the policy. Mr Belmar did reference that I would be making a point of what occurs on page 73, or specifically page 11 of the policy itself in relation to the child safe reporting process. Whilst it is an obligation for everyone within the organisation to be aware of the policy, most importantly, it is important for the application of the policy to be effective that we understand what is a reportable incident, what is the process if such an incident sadly would occur, and what to do and what is the internal and external response necessary. That provides a practical way of ensuring that we are aware of our obligations, that we are putting at the forefront of safety and a safe environment to individuals concerned, to ensure that there is consistent with the policy application. But in the event that unfortunately such instances occurs, that there is a reporting framework that can identify the issue and deal with it and hopefully rectify it as quickly as possible in the best interest of the child and the young person. So I do note that there is a very practical aspect to the policy rather than setting principles and guidelines, and one which will make its implementation that much more effective. And with those words, Chair, backing up what Mr Belmar said, I'm pleased to endorse the policy through the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and thanks for highlighting that table in the report. In particular, I think it's important to note that the organisation does support in-house training for staff and also for ourselves, which we have engaged in with respect to that reporting process and the issues around child safety within the organisation. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is council delegates, and we have a recommendation with respect to the appointment of council delegates to represent council on a range of committees for the year ahead. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I'll move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar.
Chair, I don't propose to speak at any length. It is self-explanatory. but to note that I am pleased to accept the delegate responsibility of the Audit Risk Committee, Mr Belmar, as the delegate to the Casey Cardinia Library Corporation, with yourself, Chair, as a substitute, and yourself, Chair, as Council Delegate to the MAV, the Western Port Biosphere Foundation, and the South East Council's Climate Change Alliance. We went through quite a significant exercise probably 2 years ago now, insofar as committees and council delegates on a range of external committees and groupings, and the remaining committees for us to be involved in, and certainly I think it's reflective of the improved governance that we have within the organisation, and allows us to meet our statutory and our municipal obligations accordingly. So I'm pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I endorse entirely Mr Boardman's comments, and I have nothing further to add to this motion, and I likewise am happy to accept the nomination as a delegate to the Casey Cardinia Library Corporation.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6 is a contract for the cleaning of council buildings and other facilities. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, please speak to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I note the motion that I am moving this evening includes Council adopt particular suppliers for our cleaning contracts. I know that the motion includes those figures, and the report, which outlines that in May 2022, an officer report was tabled, and that this has come back to us in part to ensure that there's full compliance with all table figures being available and transparent. I am happy to move this motion. I note that careful work has been done to achieve value for council in its cleaning contracts, and with those comments I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, I endorse the comments of Mr Belmar, noting that this process has been conducted consistent with our procurement policies, and that we have received advice from our lawyers in regards to the tenure of the specific contracts. It's reflective of current economic conditions that there is undoubtedly an uplift in the value of the contracts, and that is understandable, but satisfied that fair market valuations and good practice in procurement has been applied, and that we are appointing the successful contractors that are in the confidential attachment for the facilities as listed in the recommendation for initial 3-year terms, which will be reviewed at the end of the 3-year terms with potential uplift consistent with CPIs, but there might be an option to extend terms for a maximum of 7 years if we do get to that situation. So I'm happy to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And the final item for this afternoon's public meeting is item 5.7, which is Section 11A Instrument of Authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Chair, I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, another procedural recommendation and report that we find with a degree of regularity at council meetings, understanding that there is obligations under Section 147(4) of the Planning Environment Act and Section 313 of the Local Government Act to appoint Class A and Class B officers as listed in the report. It is customary that an organisation of this size would have a staff turnover of this level that requires the instrument to be consistent with our statutory obligations, and that is fully understandable and expected in the circumstances. But it is important, again, to note the valuable work that these particular individual officers do, not just insofar as meeting their regulatory obligations around planning, environment and other decision makings from a whole and municipal basis, but ensuring, as we have articulated as a consistent theme in this council meeting, that they're taking on board community consultations and feedback in that decision-making process and providing us with responsive and professional and comprehensive advice, which we are very confident that they are doing. So I thank all the officers concerned and note that this is a procedural matter that we do receive with a degree of regularity, I should say, but completely expected and understandable in the circumstances. I'll move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Belmar.
I'm happy to second the motion, noting that it's important and fundamental that at all times appropriate delegations are kept up to date, and I thank all officers who have worked to ensure that we're in compliance with our statutory obligations.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. It is somewhat of a peculiarity, the regularity with which this comes to council. It would be hopeful that in the future it would be a matter that would be able to be delegated to our CEO, but that's a future regulatory change not in our control. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 6 is consideration of reports of committees, and we're looking at page 93 of the agenda this afternoon, and we note that record of discussion. Item 7 is petitions, and there are no petitions listed for the council meeting or received for the council meeting today. Item 8 is urgent business, and there is no urgent business. And item 9 is closed council. There is one matter for consideration in confidential session this afternoon, and that's pursuant to Section 3 of the Local Government Act 2020. The CEO has determined that the reports listed and their attachments are confidential in accordance with Section 3 of the Act for the reasons specified, and that's Section 3K, information prescribed by the regulations to be confidential information for the purposes of consideration of the matter. So I shall move to close this afternoon's meeting. I thank those members of the gallery for joining us this afternoon, and for those members of the community who raised questions and expressed interest in our work. So good afternoon and thank you.